All right, we'd like to welcome everyone out here to our city council meeting, especially all those that are in our chamber tonight and those that are out in TV land. We appreciate that. I've asked Councilman Schoves to give us an opening prayer.
My Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity to be able to gather together as a city and as a community this evening. We're grateful for the members of our community that serve and give of their time so freely in many volunteer status. We're grateful for the EMS, police, fire crews, and others that work to keep our community safe, and grateful for the safety which we enjoy. We ask at this time a blessing to be upon this meeting, that all those that present and all those that speak might have a clear mind, might be able to do so in a manner to be able to convey the messages and feelings which they have, to be able to help the council, mayor make the decisions needed for the guidance of the city along with city staff to continue the administration of our affairs. We're grateful for the freedoms we enjoy and ask especially thy blessing to be upon the service members and their families throughout the world, that they might be safe, protected in their service for our country. And this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I've asked Council Member Beck to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand and repeat the pledge after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments. Anyone from the public would like to come up and address the mayor and the council, you're sure welcome to come up and address us at this time. Seeing none, we'll go to council comments. Council Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to announce that today we had a ribbon cutting down at Clegg Auto with the chamber. Clegg has recently expanded and opened an auto body portion to their business, so congratulated them today. As far as the chamber goes, tomorrow we'll have our new networking lunch, where we'll hear from our very own Candy Bomber tomorrow down at the fairgrounds. So our business community is welcome to come to that, and welcome any of you for that networking lunch tomorrow. Looking forward to that. The light parade is a week from Friday, so the day after Thanksgiving. And our winter lights parade, it starts down at Cal Ranch and ends down here at the park. And so we invite everybody to line Main Street on that Friday night. It starts at 7 p.m. And I believe they're still looking for any applicants. So if you'd like to do a float, if your family or your business would be interested in doing something along those lines, please get with the chamber if you'd like to do something like that. And then, Scott, you got my picture? So this Friday night at 6 p.m. at Spanish Fork High School, our police department is going to play a basketball game against the Spanish Fork High School boys team. It's $3 admission or $2 for students, and that should be a good time if you are not busy that night. I'm really rooting for our officers. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Argyle.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to let you know that the seniors had we had a board meeting, and one of the things that was discussed is our director there, Verna Joel, has applied for a CDBG grant to pay for a new dishwasher. Right now we're leasing that dishwasher. It's a lot of money for a dishwasher, but anyway, that will help pay for that new dishwasher that they need. Seth? Am I okay to mention? A little bit? I'd just like to make mention, so all of you are aware, I hope you're aware of right now, that the city has purchased a piece of ground and we're going forward with an all-abilities park on that piece of ground. The ground's located on about 12th East and Canyon Road, a piece that was purchased from a lady, her name was Patricia Jacks. Here a little while ago we received a letter from I was a great-granddaughter of Leo William Jacks and Hazel Jacks, who owned this piece of ground. And she shared something that was kind of not some of the things that we've done. Seth, our city manager, has mentioned that as we was trying to purchase this ground for this All Abilities Park, some many miracles took place in order for Spanish Fork City to do this. This piece of ground was looking at some development and some other things, and now it's going to be an awesome park in Spanish Fork, our All Abilities Park. But she shared with us that her great-grandmother, Hazel, was always involved with special needs. She started one of the first schools in Spanish Fork to help with special needs. So she was dearly touched that this piece of ground was, and she shared with us that she's probably pretty sure that her great-grandma and grandpa was involved in some of those miracles for the city to purchase this ground and go forward with this All Abilities Park. I just thought that was neat that Hazel Jacks, many years ago, was involved with the special needs of our community. I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Beck.
Okay, I just have two things. First of all, thank the residents that attended the library meeting last Wednesday night. There were several hundred people there, and we received a lot of great feedback. Several hundred surveys were filled out. We'll have a feasibility meeting next week to get the answers and everything pulled together and see what direction the residents would like us to go with the new library. So thank you to everyone who participated there. And then we'd just like to remind you all that the Festival of Lights will open on Thanksgiving Day and run through New Year's Day. It runs nightly from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., just right there right on Powerhouse Road. And the car is $8, $22 for a commercial van, $22 for a trailer, or $30 for a bus. So if you'd like more information, that's also on our website. That's all I have.
Councilman Scope.
Mayor, just a report, the Veterans Council, the Veterans Committees, the different organizations, the VFW and the American Legion, held different assemblies, performances, ceremonies, different things throughout the community and neighboring communities in celebration of Veterans Day. Many of them took place either the Friday before Veterans Day, which was the 11th, or on the Tuesday after the 12th. But they were well received. I don't have numbers right now of how many kids, I guess the viewership, so to speak, but every year they do a great job with it. I wasn't able to go with them this year, had duties in D.C. for the Army, but a great event. Those that I have spoken to, that they went to their schools, those principals, again, very grateful for the veteran service, and then the lessons that they teach our youth about our freedoms. And so just report that it was successful, and next Veterans Council meeting will be in January as they start looking to Memorial Day in May and the holidays. So that's all.
Great. Councilman Mendenhall.
Thank you, Mayor. Had a Parks and Rec meeting a week ago Monday. Again, thanks to the good folks that come out and volunteer their time, like so many do in the city, to further the efforts of a Parks and Rec program that's second to none. It's just awesome to kind of click through the agenda of each Parks and Rec meeting and see how many good things they do for the community. Excited for the basketball season to come in too. Spent a night last week up at the Diamond Fork Junior Highs watching some of the best 7th graders. I don't know about best basketball, acumen, but at least the best 7th graders of our community and their parents. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for involving your kids in good, worthwhile things like playing sports together. So I'll keep a running report, Mayor, of how the Celtics do this year. We're expecting big things.
You got a great name.
Yep.
That's the team.
We got a good name, and we'll see how far we go. Let's see if we have a Larry Bird on our team or not. Not a Gordon Hayward. That's too recent.
Well, he'd be injured.
Yeah. Okay.
Too many times.
All right. So go Celtics. Had a League of Cities and Town board meeting. Yesterday up in Salt Lake. That I'll serve as the chair of this year. Grateful for the good mayors from all over the state and council members that to make up that board. You should know we're discussing all the pertinent things that do affect us as citizens of the great state of Utah. You know, you're hearing all the different things in the news about tax policy, about all the different changes that happen at the state level, and the league is a great place to meet and collaborate, concert our efforts towards making sure we're protecting the government that's closest to the people. So fortunate to serve up there, and it was a good board meeting with the many mayors and council members of across the state. All 248 cities and towns from the state of Utah are members of that organization, and we're proud of that. Proud of Spanish Fork's involvement as well. We're a big part of that, from everybody from our attorney, Junior Baker, to Seth, to Dave, to the mayor, and all of our different departments that give their time to help further the efforts of the league. Proud to have some of my fellow Rotarians in the audience tonight, Chris Child and Glenn Cobb, and I'm excited for Spanish Fork 101 that's coming up. But we've had a couple of Rotary meetings like we do every week, and a really cool one today from what I heard. But man, what a night to be a scout that comes to the city council meeting and get to be in the presence of truly one of our finest military heroes that gets to be here tonight. And so I'm excited for what's coming up 101 after your remarks, Mayor. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Just first of all, let me apologize for not wearing a tie and not being dressed up. I just had a total shoulder replacement a week ago. I haven't figured out how to tie a tie with one hand yet, so if you can bear with me. But while I was there, I was over at the hospital, at Intermountain Hospital in Provo, and when they found out I was the mayor, everyone said, "Oh yeah, well, you guys can't wait for your hospital to get built because we want to move over to that hospital." And they all knew about Spanish Fork, and you know, got a lot of praises for the good work that we're doing here in Spanish Fork with all the development and just the fine city that we have. And so that was kind of good to hear. I think that's what I heard. You know, I was a little doped up, but you know, so that's what I'm going to run with right there. Also, I want to thank everyone that took the time to go out and exercise their right to vote in the last few weeks here. We'll be certifying the election tonight. And I want to just thank everyone that took the time to study out the issues, to vote for your candidate who you thought would represent you the best. And we have the mail-in ballots now, so it makes it really easy for you to vote. There should be no excuse for you not to vote. When that's sent to you, you can fill it out, find out who you want to vote for. And I also want to thank all those who ran. It takes a lot of guts to put your name out there and to be exposed that way, to run for a city office and to serve your city. And I'll tell you what, it's a great opportunity. I wish everybody would have the opportunity to serve on the city council or as a mayor, because it's an awesome responsibility, and it's a very rewarding responsibility, and it's a great thing. So I want to thank all the candidates from all, not just our city, but for everywhere they are that did that. So thank you. All right, let's move then to Spanish Fork 101. My good friend. Who's taking care of this? Chris, come on up.
Well, Mayor, I'm really excited to let everyone know that which I think most people attended, our Airplanes, Trains, and Automobiles event this year. We've added a new caption to the name of it. It's Airplanes, Trains, and Automobiles, Utah's Festival of Speed. And this year it was the most successful that we've had, and we've been doing it for quite a while now. We had the automobile portion of it was put on by Richard Seal, and I'm going to have him come up here in a minute. He's prepared a kind of a photographic memory book of what transpired. We'd like to present to the city. And then this was the brainchild of Elaine Hansen, who was with our Parks and Rec department. And then this year, Emily Harriman took over in her place and just did a fantastic job. Rich did a fantastic job. We got Glenn Cobb, who was just a huge help to us. He volunteered. All these are volunteer time, their time and efforts to put on this event, and it's grown to the point where this year we were able to do a little bit better with the gate receipts versus our costs, and so we would like to make a presentation to the Gail S. Halverson Aviation Education Foundation, who is going to be building this education center that will go on our airport property. We've all been, working towards that and really excited about that coming for some time now. And so we'd like to have the mayor, if you wouldn't mind, make this presentation to the Gail S. Halverson Foundation. If we get Colonel Halverson maybe to come up and Dr. James Stewart, who is the president of the foundation.
So I want to express my gratitude for this great council, for the work you do to push Spanish Fork forward. It's a great place to live. When I finally retire, I'm going to be out there on the floor.
Finally retire.
Well, we sure appreciate you and being a part of our city. One day he told me, he said, when we were talking one time, and he said, you know what? He said, I think I'll run for mayor one time when you're done. I hope you're willing to like that. I don't want to run against you. So,
Hope you get political first.
that's right, but on behalf of the city and that, we would like to present this check to the Halverson Fund to help with the museum. Don't want you going out cashing this on your way home. Quiet, sit down in Rich. He likes a clean slate. There you go. Got it?
First
All right.
time in my life.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
I sure appreciate it. I love the friendship. We'll
Long
be back.
time, it's a great place to be from.
You got that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may say, as I've met with corporate officers of the corporations that are listed in the brochure that you have, and have told them about Spanish Fork, they've all been intrigued that a city would be so intimately involved in this sort of a project. Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Stuart, thank you.
Thank you.
Good men. There's some good men there.
And then we thought, as long as we had Colonel Halverson here tonight, we, members of the Rotary Club, we have a presentation that we'd like to ask the Rotary Club, and Glenn Cobb will come up and represent the Rotary Club to make another presentation to Colonel Halverson.
Here, you just come. Oh, you want him to come up? I was going to say, you just need to stand on the other side of the pulpit and just look at us.
Address us, Glenn.
Because this camera, where 15 million people can look at you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so there you go.
So first of all, the mission of the Rotary Foundation, of Rotary International, is to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through the improvement of health, the support of education, and the alleviation of poverty. Colonel Halverson, in recognition of your contributions to the growth of our aerospace industry, but even most important, the goodness you've spread through humanity, throughout the world, thus living values, the values of Rotary. Sorry, a little choked up. I've seen so much goodness in my short time knowing this man. So on behalf of the Spanish Fork Rotary Club, we're honored to present you with Rotary's International Paul Harris Award. Now, Gail, tonight he joins the ranks of people like polio vaccine developer Jonas Salk, the president, Jimmy Carter. You're about his age, aren't you?
Probably a little older.
You have everybody beat. U.S. astronaut James Lovell,
Yeah,
and even Mother Teresa.
yeah, that's very good. She's a great lady.
So, and this is the award. It's very prestigious, and we're honored to give this to you, Gil.
Well, I'm wondering, I used to ride my horse and farm out downtown, but the traffic got too bad. I was pretty shy. Running on fields there.
There you go.
But, very much appreciate all this from all of you.
Thank you.
I neglected to mention Mr. Rich Harris, our treasurer here from the Rotary too. So the Rotarians present here tonight, we appreciate all you do, all the good things that you do as a club and all the clubs in Spanish Fork.
That's great. You know, I always said we got great people in this great community, and that just shows you there, and we appreciate all of them, every one of them. All right, let's move on. Now, you don't have to stay the rest of the meeting, you know, because it gets really boring. So, thank you. All right. Consent items.
Motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. All right, public hearing ordinance Z13-19, amending the general plan map and official zoning map of Spanish Fork City for Spanish Fork Parkway and US 6 intersection.
Yeah, yep, you open that for me.
Mayor, thank you. The proposal has a couple of different pieces. We'll take a look at a map here in just a second. One piece involves amending the city's general plan map. The other part involves amending the city's zoning maps. There's just a couple of maybe background things. Not that I'm trying to stall it all, but the general plan, just as a reminder, is to some extent the city's blueprint for future land uses in the community. It's kind of the city's vision for the future relative to what's going to be built and where different things are going to be built. By design, it's not intended to be an entirely precise document, but we do try to be forward-looking and to look at opportunities where, as you would expect, different land uses make sense. So tonight we're talking explicitly about the north half of the intersection of Spanish Fork Parkway and US Highway 6. There's a city-owned property on the northwest corner of that intersection. And Scott, maybe if we can start by having the general plan layer turned on. This property right here is owned by Spanish Fork City. That was purchased just, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, in anticipation of a fire station being constructed on the property and the substation being built, the power substation. As you can see, the power substation was constructed. Since the property was purchased, the city has gone a different direction. We all know that the fire station is under construction instead of on the north side of the railroad tracks and Highway 6. It's on the south side. Right here will be, when it's built here, I understand about a year. With that change, the city has some property here that we don't have a use for. And really to go back to being consistent with this document, the way that it read before the city purchased this property and it was designated then public facilities. One part of the proposal tonight involves simply changing the general plan designation on these properties to mixed use. Just changing from public facilities to mixed use. I'll touch on this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But relative to amending the general plan, we're only talking about making an adjustment on properties that are on the west side of Spanish Fork Parkway. that's one part of the proposal that's being made tonight, and honestly, I think we as staff are being a little bit opportunistic to kind of talk about a couple of different things at once. We did receive a proposal to change the zoning of property that's right here. So Scott, maybe if you can go to the zoning map now. We've been looking at this for a few months now. And I'll cut to the end. The proposal is to change the zoning so that a convenience store can be built on, I'm going to call it the northeast corner of that intersection. And the idea of changing the zoning, can you go to the next page on this? It's maybe a little bit more descriptive. So, again, mixed use, just to go back to that for a quick second. As we saw just a minute ago, this is the current map. This is how it would look if the proposal is approved. Again, changing basically this property here, making no adjustments over on the other side of Spanish Fork Parkway. And then on the zoning, the original proposal involved changing the zoning from can you scroll down just a little bit? I want to make sure I get this right. From public facilities here and rural residential over on the other side. That's how the property's currently zoned on the northeast corner of the intersection, to where those properties would be consistently zoned on the north half of that intersection to commercial 2. And again, that has been motivated by the application that we have to construct a convenience store here, and frankly the city's motivation to put the property on the market that we own, that the city owns, with the idea that it makes some sense to develop that non-residentially. The Planning Commission reviewed the proposal in their last meeting and recommended that the general plan amendment and the zone change both be approved. And I guess not necessarily in any specific order, but I want to report on something that some residents brought to my attention that I feel like I should have brought up in the Planning Commission meeting, relative to a previous general plan amendment that was proposed a couple of years ago, and some things that we as staff said that we would do. When a proposal was made to include a much larger area on the east side of Spanish Fork Parkway in a general plan amendment, with the anticipation that potentially it would make some sense to have maybe 10 or 20 or 40 acres of that property developing non-residentially, maybe with a big grocery store or something like that. Ultimately, that proposal to amend the general plan was put on hold, and staff was directed to see that a study was conducted to identify potentially how much space really should be preserved for non-residential development in this area. And again, I don't recall exactly when that was. I want to say it was about 2 years ago, might be a little bit longer ago than that. And it's not very often that we don't do what we're asked, and we indeed did engage with a group that several of you know very, very well. Now it's Colliers, very, very reputable commercial representatives, commercial brokers. They have a very, very strong analytics division. We spent not necessarily a lot of time, but we had a few meetings with them relative to that direction that we received, to have that study performed. And this is where things get really anticlimactic. But with that concept in mind, they basically came back after investing maybe 15 or 20 hours into doing some research with a pretty candid response, which was, we're not going to be able to give you anything that we would suggest you make any decisions based on. Given the variables that exist with other properties that may or may not develop commercially, with how quickly things might grow, with some macro things like how the retail industry might change over the course of the next 10 or 20 years. They were pretty explicit in ways that I really, really appreciated about that task just not being something that they legitimately could complete. If I remember correctly, they were very clear about offering to take more of our money and to bill us for more hours and to give us something, but they didn't feel like that was in the city's best interest, and I was very, very comfortable just seeing that project end at that point. But I mentioned that for your benefit and for the benefit of anybody that we might not have shared that with to date. And I frankly think we're still in the same position relative to being able to look from a land use perspective and try to see what might make sense in terms of a need. From that perspective, I'll mention this, it's been discussed. Should we look at maybe a broader change to the general plan than what's being considered tonight? I think there's value in letting that be driven by a particular land use proposal, rather than maybe having the city be a little bit more proactive. Generally speaking, this intersection is an intersection that was identified 10 years ago as a prime candidate for some kind of non-residential development. I think the proposal that we have to develop convenience store now supports that. What we're seeing happen on the other side, the south side of this intersection, also supports that. And we do try not to miss opportunities to preserve land for the types of uses that I think might happen at this intersection. Now, that all being said, I want to express my thanks for the time that some area residents took to meet with some of us on Friday. And when Ms. Martineau was very gracious to host us in her home. And I really appreciated a conversation that we had. I'm not going to try to speak for anybody, but what I heard, I basically distilled to, among other things, the folks are very, very concerned, or some are, in the neighborhood about making sure that what happens is as compatible with their neighborhood as it can be. And from that perspective, there was a suggestion made that I think makes really, really good sense, if I understood it the right way, and it was to employ a different commercial zone than what we had been contemplating, a zone that has some much more significant restrictions on permitted uses than our commercial 2 zone. It has some other restrictions in place relative to the scale of what can be built there in terms of building size. And I think that particular zoning district is very, very well suited to this location, with one change being made to it. And this, I know in some respects, is not an insignificant change, but frankly, I think this change relative to eliminating a restriction on operating hours is going to be important if this zoning district gets used anyplace else in the community. The commercial 1 zone has been in the city zoning code now for at least 15 years that I'm aware of. I think now there's just one property in the city that's zoned commercial 1. Previously there were 2. The other property received a zone change a couple of years ago, and now there are townhomes on that site. This particular zoning district has been completely avoided by prospective developers because of that hours of operation limitation. And I think really maybe its only way to serve a purpose in the community is to eliminate that. I think this is a great reason to make that change. So tonight, relative to what I'm going to suggest that you consider relative to action, first would be to take action to amend the general plan map. And then I think whether you're inclined to approve the zone change so that the area identified there as C2 would instead be commercial 1. I think that certainly could work well tonight. But then also, if you felt more comfortable continuing that to a future meeting while we take a proposed text amendment on the commercial 1 zone through the process, so that could be right perhaps for your next meeting in December, and then considering the proposed map and text amendments at the same time. I think that works really, really well also. I'm going to just leave my comments at that. We can certainly get into more detail about the proposal for the convenience store. That is not on your agenda tonight for approval. Ultimately, that is something that the Development Review Committee would approve, and we frankly do still have some work to do on that before it's going to be ready for action. But again, we're happy to talk through as many of those details as you'd like.
On the thing you say 10 acres, that you're looking at? Is that, so are you talking 5 and 5, or what are you talking?
Yeah, so if we take the entire area that's outlined on the zone change, including US 6, to go across US 6, and in fact, in reality, we probably should change this over here as well. It's the highway, but for the sake of having a map that makes a little bit more sense. Once we do that, the entire area ends up being about 10 acres. This site here, where the convenience store would be located, just to give you a sense of scale, that's about 3 acres in size. The city-owned properties, I think, are a little bit more than 4 acres in size.
So with our substations there, would that need to remain public facilities, or does that matter?
You know, we allow things like that in every zoning district, so it wouldn't have to, although frankly, it could. Or we could configure the proposed zone change so the property that is on the west side of the substation, this triangle here, could be left out. I think there are a lot of different approaches that could be taken there. We've talked a little bit about what might make the most sense. Honestly, I don't see this area here developing standalone, but perhaps if somebody could configure an access through here, you know, maybe that would want to develop this property and use this area for parking, that could work. And I think as staff, we've proposed something here that potentially would allow for the greatest number of possibilities in terms of the development of the city-owned parcel there. But I think that could take a lot of different shapes and sizes and still work well.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, you ready?
Well, before we go into public hearing, could we see like the C1?
Do you mind pulling that up? Yeah, I didn't mean to gloss over that too quickly. So this is at this point a concept
What do you want me to pull, Dave?
memo.
Oh, the memo, okay.
I just want to compare it, like, with this one being.
So relative to the things that might be most pressing, and this is something that certainly hasn't been thoroughly vetted at all, but this list of uses is very compatible with what I think you would expect to see at this type of an intersection. I don't see a need for it to be more broad than that. The restriction that I referenced earlier, you know, there are a lot of different ways that could be approached. I would recommend that simply be eliminated. And I think there is certainly room to add additional criteria to the zone to try to address the concept of scale, that is bulk and mass of buildings, and how well that might fit in with adjacent residential development. Right now, the language would limit a particular business space to 7,500 square feet, but we don't necessarily have a maximum building size. For a lot of different reasons, I think it makes sense to do that. Thinking about not only this property, but others in the community where it might make sense to employ this zoning district. We already have a pretty strict height limitation, which is more stringent than what we have in our commercial 2 zone, where the height of anything built in this zone couldn't be any greater than the height of a home that could be constructed in a residential neighborhood. Those are some provisions that I think are important. And particularly when it comes to having non-residential development that doesn't cause neighbors grief over time, things like drive-throughs become important to regulate, I think, with a particular level of care. So making that a conditional use in the zone so that the city could look at things in a site-specific manner and maybe to employ site-specific conditions on that particular use. I think that makes some sense. So again, I don't necessarily want to suggest that this is the product that we would bring forth here maybe in the next few weeks, but I think it's hopefully a good start.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Since this is a public hearing, I would entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Scobes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone that would like to come and talk about this change on our general map, official zoning, come up. Just remember, we'd like to you got 3 minutes, and anyone that wants to talk, please, if someone's already said the same thing that you're going to say, please don't repeat it. We understand the first time, so if you have something different, come on up and we'd appreciate it. So come up and state your name, and time's yours.
Hi, my name is Rachel Heath, and I live in the neighborhood to the north. I guess I was the one that came up with the idea of doing C1. I thought it would be a good compromise because our neighborhood recognizes that houses aren't going to be built right up against the railroad tracks and right up against the highway. We do have several concerns, like Dave said. Dave actually emailed this to me yesterday, so I've been mulling it over. But my biggest concern, and I think my neighbors will say the same thing, is striking the hours of operation, being that it's currently zoned estate lot, low, rural residential. With the hospital opening next year, I would anticipate that there would be a great need for lots in Spanish Fork that are bigger in size. There's very little of it left in the city, and so I think that right there is worth preserving. This is my favorite picture that I took off my back deck, because my back deck, our backyard goes right up against Spanish Fork Parkway. So in addition to the hours of operation, I would say my biggest concern is the precedent that it will set for future development needs, and any future land use that goes into it. If it goes in as C2, then there automatically needs to be a buffer of some kind of high density residential or other types of commercial or uses, and that just encroaches farther closer to our neighborhood. I don't know if any of you drive this road on a regular basis, but also the traffic is a big concern in conjunction with the railroad tracks. I did some research. I called the Spanish Fork Police Department last week and requested the accident records for that intersection, and I got them back today. Since 2006, January 2006, when the police department got their new system, there have been 100 accidents at that intersection in 13 years, well, almost 14 years. This year alone, there have been 9 accidents, and one of those accidents was a fatal accident, in which someone passed away. And she was, as far best I can tell, she was turning left onto Spanish Fork Parkway, and the car behind her pushed her into the intersection, and she was killed. I think Jamie will probably talk more about that because she knew the woman who was killed. And there was that accident, and there's one in January 2014, which my husband and I have friends who are, it was their brother-in-law who was killed that time. And neither of those were involving the train. But heaven forbid the traffic, it gets built up enough and the traffic increases enough that there's impact with either a truck or a tanker filling up the gas station. I see trucks straddle the train tracks all the time. On a daily basis, every time I go through there, there's either cars sitting on the train tracks or trucks sitting on the train tracks. So this should not be taken lightly. I know I'm past my 3 minutes, but I also want to say I grew up in Orem, and I moved to Spanish Fork because I love it here. I don't want to see Spanish Fork make the same planning mistakes that Orem made 30 or 40 years ago, because I've watched neighbors have to sell their houses to the city to widen 800 North, and now they're doing it on 1600 North. So I don't want to be that house that, if Spanish Fork Parkway needs to become a 4-lane highway, that you have to buy my house in 20 or 30 years and tear it down to widen the road. So I think that's where I'll end it.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Anyone else? He's got the timer up there now, so you can always just keep glancing there, so we can kind of keep her under
Just face
control.
this way, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, that's why we have the officer back there.
Things orderly. I'm Jenny Martineau. I'm the one who met with Mr. Gordon and Ms. Beck in my home last Friday with a few neighbors to discuss this subject. And it was during the course of the conversation that C2 be changed to C1. And that was through due diligence from our neighbors doing some research on that. And for that, I'm grateful. At the time that we were speaking about it, it was widely mentioned that there would be, with C1, that there would be those hours of operation, which we were all on board for. And then seeing that crossed out up there, and I know Rachel already said something, but it just really chaps my hide, okay, and to speak in Spanish Fork terms. That's part of the reason why we were on board with the compromise, is we are close to that little intersection. We're more so than we are the Walmart across, the small mart across the street. So having those hours of operation for C1, I really feel is an important thing. I also gave the analogy, the story of the frog in boiling water. You put a frog in boiling water, he jumps right out, but if you put a frog in cold water and turn up the heat, he's dead before he realizes he's now in boiling water. And that's what I fear what will happen in our little neck of the woods out there if it stays at C2. Because right now it's only 3 acres of land. Oh, but now we only need 3 more acres of land. Oh, and now we need 5. Now we just need 2 more. And now we have a lot of commercial, big commercial. For that reason, C1, we get it. We know that it's going to have to be commercial at some point. I'm not thrilled about it. I really am not. But if that's the way it has to go, I would rather see it at C1 than at C2. That's just too big. There's Nebo land out there for school. I told these in our meeting on Friday, I've heard it proposed that in the next 10 years, there's going to be 4,000 homes between Spanish Fork Parkway and the hills. And that includes Mapleton. So that's a big chunk of people out there. And yeah, commercial would be great, but we're not at that 10-year mark right now. We don't need the big commercial. So keeping it small, the residential, commercial, if it has to go that way, please, C1. I'm not thrilled about the gas station. Call it a convenience store if you'd like, but when you put, and the plans currently look like there's 18 pumps there. That's a gas station.
Right on time.
On my mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Anyone else? Come on up, or I'm going to close it. Either way.
Well, every time I stand up, he stands up. So. Okay, my name is Jamie. The gal that died was actually a friend of my aunt's. So I did not know her personally, but it's pretty close to home. Oh, speaking of which, my house is pretty immediately close to that intersection. It's 9 this year, seems quite low. I I don't sit here and take notes on it, but my house backs up to that intersection, and I regularly walk into my kitchen and see lights and sirens out on that corner. So maybe it's happening a couple feet down, so it's not considered the intersection. I don't know. But there are a lot of incidents that happen at that intersection. I only moved in there not quite 4 years ago, and there were 3 in one day shortly after I moved in. So 9 thus far in this year, that feels low to me. Maybe there's a threshold for damage for incidences. I don't know. Okay, so I'm not here to debate anybody selling their land. That's none of my business, but it is my business when what happens with that land adversely affects me, my family, my neighborhood, and my community. It's been touted as a convenience store, but it's a gas station. It's a gas station that also has a car wash, which is also really loud and crazy and not fun. It does look like there's 18 pumps on the plan, but they're probably double-sided, so that's more like 36 maybe. I don't know. We have a technical plan here. It's not marked for your average Joe to take a look at. I'm very concerned about the safety approaching that convenience store from the highway. There's not a lot of room from the highway to that driveway, and I guarantee there's going to be backup not only onto the train tracks, but onto the highway, which we know is a deadly highway. That's where my concerns lie. I was told that the northbound lane from the highway would be improved. If you look on the plans, it's still one lane because there's the train tracks to concede with. So I don't think anybody's widening that. After the train tracks, it looks like it's supposed to go into a lane in each direction and a median lane. Someone said, oh, well, you can use the median lane to pass. Is that what median lanes are for? I thought they were for merging. Turning and merging, not for passing, not for driving. So now we have access point that's really dangerous because we're going to have people backing up on the highway. What happens if it's a tanker on that train track and trains coming because people are backed up? It's a recipe for disaster. I don't want to watch somebody explode and die out my back window. Probably will happen. At least Spanish Fork Parkway is going to be a main thoroughfare down to the hospital, right? So we can get people there faster when we increase the accidents that happen at that intersection. It's a big concern. I'm also really concerned. She talked about the frog in the bottle and the boiling water. I like to talk about the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We're told it's a convenience store. We find out it's a gas station. Not a small gas station, a huge gas station. Looks like they want land. They want even more land. So what's going to happen there? They're going to start taking off little bites at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you destroy a city? One bite at a time. We're not even talking about the emissions and the environmental impact. How benzone, major component of gasoline, causes leukemia. And I mean, I was at the Orem Costco, and they have 8 pumps. We're looking at maybe 18, who knows? We haven't got confirmation on that. Orem gas station, they told me that they have 1 spill every month. You cut me off, huh?
No, I'm just saying your time's up, but if you'll just wrap it up, I'll give you that to wrap it up.
They have 1 spill every
I
month.
mean, I've heard about the pumps over and over again, so move on to something else. It'd be great.
We'll talk about gas spills. Orem gas station with 8 pumps, they told me they have 1 spill every month. That's at a Costco where there's little distractions. You can't do anything else at a Costco except for get your gas. You can't even wash your windows in the same spot. You got to move to another spot. You don't have a convenience store. You don't have bathrooms. You don't have kids. You're trying to get in and out of the car. You don't even go inside to pay a cashier. You pay right at the pump. They have 1 spill a month. Now we're doubling, close to tripling the amount of pumps. How many spills that happens there? I don't know. How badly does that affect the environment? I don't know. Something to think about.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is John Linton. I represent Holiday Oil Gas Station. So I appreciate hearing the concerns of the residents here. And you're absolutely right. It's not just a convenience store. It would be a gas station. The square foot of our convenience store would be about 4,000 square feet. We would have 2 canopies, so there will be a lot of pumps there. And we are proposing a car wash on the far southern end. So just, if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to go through a site plan. But To the concerns about traffic, every time I go on Highway 6 between Spanish Fork and Wellington and then even to Moab, I'm terrified. There's accidents on that road all the time. And so everything that they're saying I think is absolutely accurate. And I think we need to take their qualitative, what you've heard tonight, and match it with quantitative data from the traffic impact study, which we've already engaged with, and we're working closely with the engineering department and planning to make sure that you have both qualitative and quantitative data to make sure that our accesses conform to what the standards should be. So in terms of hours of operation, in all of our stores along the Wasatch Front, none of them are open 24 hours a day. We don't intend for this one to be open 24 hours a day. And so we would be open to limiting the hours. Most of our stores are open from 5 a.m. till midnight. And so we wouldn't object to those to a reasonable restriction like that. So just my comments. Happy to take any questions afterward. Or
I appreciate you offering that so we can clear up with some of that stuff with them. Okay, anyone else?
My name is Holly Freshay, and I also live in that same neighborhood. And I just want to represent the very small minority in our neighborhood that is not as concerned about this. My husband and I are probably the only ones who aren't totally opposed to it, but we feel like in terms of both sides of the land, and it sounds like the lines have blurred a little bit tonight because we've been talking about both sides of Spanish Fork Parkway, but the farmers in our neighborhood that want to sell, we feel like they ought to be able to sell and do what they need to do with their land, and we're not opposed to that in any way. And if gas stations want to go in, we grew up in big cities in California, and we do love the ruralness of Utah, and we love living in Spanish Fork. And we specifically built up on the bench area because of the open space, but we also recognize that development happens. And there were a lot of people in our area that were opposed to that little Walmart going in. All those same people go and shop at that little Walmart. We love the little Walmart. It's been fantastic to have that there, and has, I think, been really beneficial for our community. We appreciate the farmers who have sold their land so that we could build our houses on it. That's what our homes used to be, was farmland. And I get that there's a big difference between real estate development and commercial development, but at the same time, there aren't a lot of options up on our end of Spanish Fork. And when we have so many travelers coming through, it would be nice to have a little bit of competition. I know there are gas stations closer to the mouth of the canyon. There are also really expensive gas stations, not the place that we would choose to go to. We actually drive into town to get gas. We go to Costco or someplace that's a little more affordable. Having a Holiday Oil, whose prices are generally a little more competitive, we're not opposed to. We also have students at the high school, and I see the mad dash out of the high school parking lot to get down into town to get food during lunch break and make it back to class, where 50% of the students are late because they can't make it back. There isn't anything other than the little Walmart up on our end that they can get to. I think, honestly, it'd be beneficial for some of the students who just like to get away from campus for a little bit and go get a drink or a sandwich or something. And in terms of the traffic, yep, Highway 6 is terrible. And for accidents, and the canyon is known as one of the deadliest canyons in the country. However, I don't think that adding a gas station is necessarily going to increase traffic accidents. And I imagine that with a company as big as Holiday Oil, it would be unwise for them to not do something to make sure that the necessary infrastructure is in place. And we can't imagine that not happening. And I also know at one point in time, there was talk about moving that train track, and that's going to be eliminated at some point. And I know that's not happening next year, but that will also eliminate a lot of the problems right there. So I just wanted to express there are other opinions on this matter.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilmember Beck. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any questions, comments?
Dave, or someone, can you address the train tracks going away, or where we are with that? That came up Friday at Jenny's home. And,
This is the guy that can tell you, Chris. He's the master engineer.
This is likely a long time in coming, but we have been working with Mountain Lands Association of Governments to work with Union Pacific to get this track actually moved to parallel the existing track right here and be brought away. It's never ideal to have a track parallel a major arterial like this. This isn't a really safe type of intersection. So we've been working on this for a long time. We'll likely be working for a long time to come.
No time frame.
Well, and the note on that, you know, they came to us about moving that track, which never happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's half the battle, but it's still a slow battle, you know. I'd like to see it in my lifetime, see that track gone, but I'm not holding my breath over it. But at least we're in talks, and you know, you never know, it could happen.
I believe it'll happen. It'll be a process, and there's a lot of positive things coming out of the legislature and from Union Pacific that this could possibly happen sooner.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Well, the hours of operation, you know, we hear the applicant say that they're willing to have a restriction. So that poses a whole other thing, and I think that's a question maybe Dave addresses, because it sounds like maybe you've had a different idea of what Rachel had in mind, which was a great idea. We can't say enough, Rachel. We're going to put you on staff. Just so she knew the zones very well, right? Tell us why we don't use C1, or why you haven't seen C1 in the last, remind us. I mean, it's usually because of those hour restrictions, right? And that was your theory behind not having that.
Yeah, I really don't like how our room's set up sometimes. I hate it. You know, you just almost wish the podium were off to the side so you could not turn your back necessarily on people. But, and I genuinely, there were a handful of different conversations going on at some point on Friday afternoon, and I've absolutely tried to be very, very clear relative to what changes I thought we needed to make to the C1 zone in order for it to work. And it's great to hear that maybe Holiday Oil doesn't anticipate being open 24 hours a day, or at least that they wouldn't desire that. But the only reason that anybody's expressed to me about not being able to do a project in the commercial 1 zone, which is why we have a lot of other things that have happened instead in the commercial 2 zone, has been the hours of operation. So I think that's why you haven't seen proposals to change the zoning to commercial 1 over the years. Now, of course, you dictate what those provisions and regulations are. So you could keep that hours of operation limit in place. You could alter it. You could do any number of things that you want. But honestly, I think for it to be employed in any kind of a robust way throughout the community, at locations like this one where I think it really makes sense, I think it is a good site to scale things back. I would hate to see that be the decision driver, that hours of operation provision. I would much rather see us add regulations relative to how things look, the aesthetics of buildings, landscaping, what happens between a commercial development and an adjacent neighborhood in terms of screening and buffering and those types of things. I think that's going to be much more effective over time at making neighborhood commercial development really work and have it be an innocuous thing that people don't really notice, and it doesn't have an impact on the neighborhood than the hours of operation would. There are a lot, of things that can happen even with the limited number of uses that we have prescribed in the C1 zone today, but yet convenience stores are a really popular thing for the very locations that I think oftentimes we talk about using that neighborhood commercial zone in. 7-Eleven was the previous proposal where the concept was kicked out for consideration and rejected pretty quickly for this reason. But for so many other reasons, the C1 zone makes much more sense there, I think, than the C2 zone. So that's just a couple of thoughts that I have, but we can go in whatever direction, certainly, that you'd like.
Helps me. Thanks.
I just make a comment that I appreciate them indicating that they're holiday oils in their hours, but I also have a little bit of a hard time of us as a council, as a mayor, as a city, except for we did this limiting a business and their operations and how they do business. A little bit of a struggle with that, even though he says they only stay open till midnight, which is on the C1 right now it reads till 11 p.m. But Dave, you said this, you've crossed that off. You were considering taking that off on the C1, correct? Sorry.
I'd say proposing.
Proposing, okay. Okay. I just want to make that comment because I don't, this building, he says, for 4,500 square feet. It is a gas station, it's a convenience store. But for us to start limiting what they can and can't do as a business inside that zone, I would have a problem with that.
I'll make a couple of quick comments if that's okay. First of all, I want to thank the residents for being involved and reaching out to the council and letting you know that I think that you made a difference this time. I mean, we're thinking, okay, do we want to change it? Do we not? So whether we do or don't, we heard you and we listened and we value your opinions. And I know there's several people that came today that are against it. But then, Holly, you also said you feel like the small minority. I've had a couple people talk to me that they're totally fine with it as well. So sometimes it's only one group, whether for or against something, that comes, and it's scary no matter what. So thank you for being brave enough to come here, because it is scary no matter what side you're on. Sometimes it's scary on this side too. And I appreciate John from Holiday Oil being here. You answered a lot of my questions. I like leaving the C1 zone, the time being taken off, next month as we look things over, but I would love it if you chose on your own not to be open too. So, and that could change in 5 or 10 years. So I appreciate you being here as well. And for now, that's all I have.
Anyone else?
I know we don't have a plat map yet to look at of how this lays out, but one of the concerns that I think is valid that was brought up is how that changes a little bit with the improvement of a property and improving the road. The zooming in on Highway 6 there a little bit, just so getting bearings correctly. This is the road that I travel 9 times a day, it feels like, back and forth from the Walmart to my home. And sometimes with the hard curve there in the Olson's property, I've wanted to just gently nudge, the things that were leaning here to see if they would fall down, but they fell down by themselves. Yeah, the wind took them down. But that hard corner there, I think with some of the residents I talked to, is a concern of that we've had in other areas of the city, making sure whatever we do is not backing up to Highway 6, because people are supposed to go 65, they're going 75 and 85. And not having a very much time to stop when something happens. So speak a little bit, Dave, maybe to what improvements get made, especially to this area here when development happens on side of it.
Hey, do you mind pulling up just that site plan? We'll maybe talk through that a little bit. We would anticipate that improvements will be made out to top into the existing US Highway 6 improvements. There would be some expansion of the roadway to match the anticipated future build-out of Spanish Fork Parkway. So for example, we've heard from folks that live on the other side of Spanish Fork Parkway, on the west side. That road was improved and expanded in that direction. That property was developed, and I hope it doesn't totally happen in the chaotic way that would exist if it's totally checkerboard one side and then the other side, but that could be the reality. As happened there, where when that property developed, that road was improved along that frontage. That's the very thing that would happen here and adjacent to every other site.
Dave, Travis is asking if he'll scoot over to the mic a little
Does
more.
this get me off camera?
Yeah.
Learn the look.
Super. It'll be wide. Maybe I should have just said that.
Widen,
Now, sorry.
well, just widen to the point where a car could turn right, get in there, and get off to the right to be able to get in there and not back up additional cars onto Highway 6 or the railroad tracks.
So there are a couple of I think, significant concerns with the development of this site. That's maybe the biggest. As Mr. Linton mentioned, they've employed a traffic engineer to perform a traffic study, and that's one of the things that will get scrutinized very carefully. Traffic backing up, particularly with the railroad tracks there, and frankly, I think almost more importantly, with US 6 being where it is, with every other intersection, and we've had more than a few, where development has happened in close proximity to US Highway 6, where that queue or that potential line distance for cars, the prospect that cars can stack at any one location before they're stopped in places where you don't want cars stopped, that's something that I'm sure will get scrutinized very particularly. UDOT is concerned about that, as well as us. So in as much as we don't necessarily always get it right, typically when there's an outside consultant involved and our staff is reviewing their work, and sometimes we even use our own consultant to do a peer review, we get pretty close, and that certainly is the hope here. But I've been a little bit hesitant to look at this, as certainly shouldn't be taken as gospel, because there could be changes to this required based on what we get with that study.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and just speaking from the youth that did work at the gas station up the road that somebody mentioned, yeah, the gas has always been pretty expensive up there, and it was when I was a 16-year-old kid working there. It was one of my first jobs, but growing up at the mouth of the canyon and parents that said, you got to work to earn your keep, that was one of my first places to work. And I won't tell you that there wasn't accidents, obviously, on Highway 6 right there in front. A couple of them pretty bad. I don't know if they were alluded to people coming or going from that gas station, but coming and going from that intersection that are things I'll never forget as a 16-year-old. So I'm saying that because I sympathize with the safety of this area, of your concerns, and those, I want you to know, those are shared concerns with I know a developer, but you can rest assured those are concerns that the city council and staff feel as well. The result of what's made that safer up the canyon, frankly, is some of the development that's come around there, that's widened that road, that's made it safer to turn onto Powerhouse Road, to turn off of Powerhouse Road, and some of those diesel trucks that go in and out of the JCPenney area there. So development is what gets some of this tough spots in our city made right, and I have all the confidence in the world for our, those studies to be done, our staff to do that as well. I guess I want to echo those concerns, but also assure residents that this isn't the end of this. This is changing the zone, allows some of this work to go forward, to make sure some of those safety measures are taken and drawn up. And if they're not drawn up right, they're sent back to the drawing board of thousands and thousands of dollars that take that to get right and make sure that it's as safe as it possibly can be. So I appreciate those concerns. I think that's the overarching concern for me. And Dave, I appreciate some clarification there of trying to get it safer.
Good. Anyone else?
Mayor, I just a couple of things.
I figured.
Let me finish this note. Just real quickly, just some of the concerns, again, echoing that of my fellow councilman. Just thank you very much for coming in. The concerns we've heard, appreciate the contact and the comments you've made. Some of the things, just as I look at it from both sides of it, as a high school teacher myself, I can tell you the kids that leave my high school quickest are the ones trying to get, I teach in Salem, trying to get to Spanish Fork to get to the bigger restaurants in Spanish Fork versus the smaller restaurants that are in Salem. So the kids that are going faster are trying to get further. That's the nature of it. And sometimes when I try to go grab a Subway sandwich because I didn't pack my peanut butter and jelly, I'm caught in that mess. And so on one hand, I can see that development here would be something closer, and possible future development of maybe those types of restaurants, Subways, Taco Bell, whatever that may be there in addition to sandwiches, burritos, and other things that I know I like at holiday convenience stores, would make it so these kids are not in a rush to get out onto the highway and get out and back, quickly. It would slow traffic down. We do see that development, if you look in parts of the neighborhood, Chris Thompson, city engineer, has had an initiative the past several years of the LID program, where the roads are a little more narrow, and there are studies across the nation that show that roads that have development closer out to the edges of the roads, the speeds are slower. I think right now, as we look at traffic coming through, they get out of the canyon, which they're either nervous, scared, or just tired, and then they're speeding through to get down to either, hopefully, our commercial areas. If we have commercial areas further up on the east, in my mind, they would be more inclined to slow down to see what's there so they can grab a bite to eat before they continue the rest of their journey to Salt Lake, Idaho, and beyond. Now, that being said, traffic currently is a huge issue. We know of the accidents that take place and have taken place. Some of the specific concerns with the traffic queuing, backups, the Utah Driver's Handbook, just for us as regular drivers, says that we are not to stop on the train tracks. People do. Whether this business or future businesses come, that is a personal driver issue, and we cannot regulate teenagers, adults, and everyone else that does it. The CDL, for commercial drivers as well, it says you will lose your CDL, and then makes it very clear for drivers who are not required, for drivers that do not stop, and they have to stop 15 to 50 feet before the tracks to make sure that it's clear of an approaching train. So the concern of a tanker being stopped on the tracks, they also by law are not supposed to stop. And again, as a city, as business owners, as landowners, we can't regulate what people do as they drive, though oftentimes as we're driving, I know we verbalize what we want them to do quite often. There are laws and restrictions there to help mitigate those things. We just don't follow them. And that's nothing as a city that we can do. That's certainly for Utah Highway Patrol and perhaps legislators to require more frequent testing for driver's licenses and things like that. Valid concerns, but certainly things that we can't adjust or address. I can say in the time I've been on the council, one thing that I've seen over and over is development drives infrastructure. It was mentioned 4,000 homes is what's projected to be in this area. If 4,000 homes come, there will be lots of sidewalks and crossings for kids, but any improvements on this area, whether the railroad tracks stay or don't, won't take place because that's outside the purview of home development. And so queuing, traffic, 4,000 times 2 or 3 kids, 12,000 feasibly drivers without the improvements that would take place with commercial development in this area. And so just something that we need to look at, that residential development and the infrastructure that they do and come about is very limited in scope as far as what they do. Certainly sewer, water, power, sidewalks, those types of things. But the queuing, the widening of roads, things like that for this are more of a commercial and retail development driver. And so it's part of that balance that we look at as a city council of, what fits and where does it fit and how does it fit and how can it best fit the needs of the entire city and certain areas of the city, looking at those restrictions. 4,000 homes, won't widen that intersection very much at all. Whereas commercial and retail, that adds certainly to what UDOT would look at, for example, because this is a UDOT road, and this would be something that they're looking at with that additional traffic. So again, just to try to answer some of the concerns that are there, do appreciate your concerns, appreciate you coming in. That being said, I also believe strongly that, none of our homes over on east side, west side, anywhere would come about if farmers hadn't sold them off years ago and years before. So I'm a big proponent of private property. If I like where I'm living, and like my views and stuff, I wish I had the money to be able to buy up as much of it around me as I could to either maintain how it looks or to change it the way I would like it. But since I don't have those resources, I'm fortunate, at least for this period of time, to be able to be in a position where I can try to do the best good for myself, my neighbors, my community, and so forth. So to the restrictions, thank you that as a business, that's how you're choosing to operate. I know there will be more discussions, but I don't see how I, as a homeowner, have the right to restrict a business on how they conduct business. That's forcing a business to create their profits and profit margins based on what I, as a non-shareholder in that business, feel, and that's just not how capitalism, the American enterprise, works. Otherwise, there are businesses that I would have shut down because I don't appreciate their business, and that's not the case either. The market will drive that. If no one shows, I'm sure you would probably close your doors at 10 p.m. if no one ever stopped there. We have to make it to where it's affordable for all of us as part of a community, business and residents. So those are my thoughts, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, thank you for some time. I know you're wanting to get home to some better pain medicine. If we could just call it. I really enjoyed meeting with many of these neighbors to hear thoughts and things like that. And on some of the things that I heard, I think some were emotionally driven. Like, none of us ever want some of the things that we are saying potentially could happen. None of us want that. None of us want some of the things that have happened. And so I always take from the lesson from an uncle that used to serve as a city councilman in the 90s, and he told me about a meeting that he went to where the proposal was for a special needs home, and sort of in the middle of town, and all the neighbors came out and said that these individuals were going to be naked, running down the streets, and fast forward 25 years later, and it hasn't happened. It could have happened. If it would have happened, we would have said, I told you so, right? And that's I always use that example of, we don't want to deal with I told you so. We want to really dial in data. And with that, I wondered if Lieutenant Johnson would indulge us with some accident data that he might have from that area. Do you have that, Matt?
I do.
How about on Friday, I heard a term while we were at the house, stop and rob, as well. And I do not want... It sounds like Councilman Mendenhall and I are in a club. We both worked at gas stations along Highway 6. Mine was down further by Cafe Rio in Navassa that I worked at, my uncle owns. And so we always thought about getting robbed and being easy access up the canyon. But it hasn't happened. And so at that one. So knocking on wood, and Matt, maybe indulge us, if you will.
Yes, I ran some data from 2006 when we started on our current reporting system. And as far as robberies go, we had a total of 51 robberies reported in Spanish Fork from January 1st, 2006 to the present day. Now then, when I speak of robbery, many of you probably think of someone brandishing a firearm or a knife or something like that. But under robbery statute in Utah, if you're committing a theft and you use force or fear, that is classified as a robbery under the definition. So the majority of these were actually retail thefts throughout different businesses in Spanish Fork where someone pushed the clerk out of the way while they were committing a retail theft, or they used some sort of fear while they were doing that. As far as aggravated robberies where weapons or the threat of a weapon were used, there are approximately 7 of those, and the majority of those occurred at financial institutions here in town, such as credit unions or banks. As far as gas stations go, we had 3 robberies reported, and one of those was actually an aggravated robbery where an individual was attempting to carjack a vehicle in that parking lot. The other 2 were during the commission of a retail theft where force or fear were used. And of those 51 incidents, 24 arrests were made. So the other incidents were cleared as either unfounded, that there was a lack of probable cause, or a suspect couldn't be identified. Now, as we turn to traffic data, UDOT has actually made some significant improvements at Spanish Fork Parkway and US 6. As I started in 1997 here as a young patrol officer, I recall responding on several different occasions to 2550 East US 6 on some severe traffic accidents. With the installation of the traffic light, the dedicated left turn lanes, as well as the warning signals to indicate when the light's going to change, that's significantly decreased our traffic accidents at that location. And those warning lights were put in place after the fatal accident in 2014. Now then, as you travel down SR6 and towards the city limits, Councilman Argyle, he can attest to this, of several accidents at the intersection of Center Street and US 6 where you reside in the area. You probably observed several of those on occasion. And from January 1st, 2006 to the present day, there have been 143 total accidents at that intersection. And as you travel further into town at Expressway and US 6, there's been a total of 279 accidents, with 1 fatal in 2018. And then as we travel to Canyon Creek Parkway, which was 1000 North or Chapel Drive, from January 1st, 2006, there's been 196 total accidents. So as we look at that data, and we look at Spanish Fork Parkway and US 6, there's been 100 since 2006. So that intersection has improved with safety.
Thanks, Matt.
You did a good job on
Appreciate that.
Way to be Johnny on the spot. I appreciate that.
He just pulled that out of his hat. He didn't have it. Like, he is so good. But again, the process of vetting all of that stuff, like that's why I really thank you for being here and being part of this process, because we want to make sure we're dealing with real data. Keir is not a traffic engineer. Let's be clear.
Amen
but
to that.
He likes to do his homework. We just have to. I'm not a police officer, so thanks, Lieutenant Johnson.
And the nice thing about, I believe it was Holly, was it? About, Spanish Fork Canyon was one of the deadliest canyons in the nation. Fortunately, we've dropped off that list. So, yeah. So, it's still scary, but we're not one of the top 10 deadliest canyons. So, and that's with the improvements. Once again, they're widening the roads and making improvements, because I used to go up and down that canyon way too many times. I could have been a statistic up there. All right.
So the motion originally was to change it to C2.
Right.
We threw a monkey wrench in the...
But because all we're doing is talking about the other. So this motion here is to change the general map to a C2. And I would entertain a motion.
Yeah.
Change it to C1 or change it to C2?
It is.
That's what we need to
That's
decide.
why it's written to change it, and so I don't know if I'm looking at Junior or Dave here to make sure we get it correct.
You would have the discretion with the public hearing on the agenda to go with a C2 or a C1 where that's been presented, it's been vetted. What you cannot do is you cannot change the language of the C1 zone tonight. That has to come through the proper process, and that isn't before you tonight.
Do you feel like they need to make separate motions on the general plan amendment and the zone change, or?
I think it's probably wise.
So you want us to make a motion on the,
On the general plan and a separate one on the zoning.
okay?
You know,
Is that a roll call vote?
it's an ordinance.
Okay, so I need a number for, because we got one number on this, and you want us to make two.
Oh.
Hey, don't let me call you out. I wasn't a lawyer either. I just pretended to be one.
We have a few of those.
I stayed at the Holiday Inn. No, I did.
So they did combine it into one. And actually, the zone change for the east side of the road is not on here either. We're just looking at the zone change for the west side of the road and the general plan amendment for both sides. So the way the ordinance is drafted, go ahead and do it in one motion. But be specific in that motion for the general plan and the zoning.
Oh, you're looking at me, huh? Like I'm,
Weird, no one's looking at me to do it.
Huh?
I said weird, nobody's looking at me to do it. I'm going for C2. No, C1.
But this doesn't correspond to any specific
Is that what we're after?
description at all after this.
Exhibit B shows that, right?
Okay,
So
so
if we go, so instead of C2, we go to C1.
Yeah, you could do that. So
does C1 meet the needs?
the proposals make both sides C2, so both sides are included on the zoning.
So does that make the change to the C1?
Still do C1. You can do one side C2, and other side C1. You do both C2, both C1. You can't change the language in the C1.
So we're just talking,
What you could do, Dave suggested when he first presented that you could change the general plan and defer the zoning until you made the change in the C1 and bring it back and then just table that action.
If it was C2, if it was made to C2 tonight, and then with the understanding moving it to C1 when the text amendment was done, is that just an extra step?
Well, you'd have to go through
Here in another public hearing, you'd have to go.
Fine, there's nothing wrong with that.
You could
so either one's going to be fine with you, right? C1 or C2, or you tell me you're the one that requested the zone change?
Yeah, so I think I defer to, I think as you see C1 right here,
You go to the next exhibit. So this is what,
as it's written, we're okay with that.
this is what we've anticipated relative to the zoning and how that would be changed. Right now, it's public facilities for everything on the west side of Spanish Fork Parkway. The Olson parcel that's involved with the Holiday Oil proposal is currently zoned rural residential. So I think in my mind, we would simply alter this exhibit relative to the ordinance, if indeed you want to act tonight to change the zoning map from those two zones to commercial one, or you could continue that, act on the general plan amendment, we have to alter the ordinance accordingly, we can do that, and then have that on your agenda, future meeting, likely the next meeting, when we have the text amendment ready for consideration. I think either of those two work well.
Yeah, and if you're asking my preference, I think if we approve the C1 zone tonight and address the changes in the zone text amendment at the next meeting, that would work. I think that would be okay.
All right. Okay, you figure that out, Gordon.
Oh, I'm not doing it. I'm confused.
So I make a motion to drop back 10 and punt.
Go with it.
Ordinance number Z13-19. I need Junior to hear this so that it makes sure it's.
Junior, you
I don't
make sure
want
you're
to.
listening.
I don't
make
want to
sure
go to
we're
jail
saying
over
this
something
right.
like this. It's got to be better than this. Ordinance number Z13-19. Ordinance amending the general plan map and official zoning map of Spanish Fork City for Parkway and US 6 intersection, referring to the Exhibit B from rural residential to C1, and tabling what am I tabling again? How would you word that? No table. Just approving that general plan map.
Do we need to say something about the text amendment?
It'll happen in our next meeting.
On your general plan, you want to make that the mixed use.
And
The mixed use will accommodate the C1 or the C2.
But that's stated in there, correct? Public facility to mixed use. Well, I guess I'm stating that in my motion.
State that first.
Yeah, that's the general plan.
The general plan, public facility to mixed use, and rural residential to C1. No.
Rural residential to mixed use.
Well, the general plan is still,
General
I told you I'd mess it up.
that's still mixed use as well.
Boy, oh boy.
Why don't you just say, and then he'll just say ditto. What do you?
Yeah. Just,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've gotten you to this point. I
Yeah.
apologize for that.
You should.
Two different components here. A motion might sound something like, I move that the general plan map be changed in accordance with what is shown on Exhibit A. I think that's simple enough, with the change from public facilities to mixed use. And that the zoning map be changed from, again, it's public facilities, but we're talking about zoning, so be changed from public facilities and rural residential to commercial commercial 1, as shown on Exhibit B with the change to commercial 1.
That is my motion.
I'll second that.
You good with that, Junior?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Got
All
that,
right.
Gene?
Wow, usually it's not that hard, Junior. Okay, so I've got a motion by Councilman Gordon,
Second.
and a second by Councilmember Beck. This is a roll call vote. Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Finally, that passes. Thank you for everyone being here and frying our brains. We appreciate that. So, and I appreciate the involvement. That's what this is all about. You know, this is your city, and this is what we want to hear from you. And we represent you, and we're trying to do what's best for everyone, and we want to hear from all sides. So thank you. Okay, let's move on to new business. River Point amended preliminary plat and development agreement approval request.
Good to see you, Joseph.
River Point. I'll just put it this way. Mayor Barney's property. You've seen it several times. The applicant would like to expand the project a little bit to include some land over here and therefore make some lots adjacent to the river wider than they currently are. I think that's a good thing. The only two things that I think are really relevant issues in expanding the project to the west, just in this area right here, the applicant would be including some land that is clearly within the 100-year floodplain. So relative to that, you'll see in the staff report that are conditions, we've recommended simply that final plat approval for what's called two different things in two different places of the applicant's submissions. One place they call it Phase 4, the other place they call it Plat B. Simply that we not approve the final plat for that particular phase until the floodplain issue has been entirely resolved with FEMA. It's a relatively small area, incidentally, on the floodplain. I understand it's about half of an acre. We've talked, frankly, as well about not working with developers to amend floodplains and that type of a thing. That's kind of been a topic du jour relative to the river bottoms. I think what you'll see us do sometime, hopefully soon, when we get a few minutes, relative to amending our floodplain ordinance is probably to bring some stricter regulations for you to consider, but to have a carve out for properties up to a certain size, might be an acre, might be a half of an acre. In any event, I think this probably would fit underneath whatever threshold we think is important to worry about. With these changes then, we do recommend as well that the applicant enter into a development agreement. This is a master plan development. A draft of the agreement is attached to the materials that you have. The city attorney hasn't given his final blessing on every word in that. So I would ask tonight that you approve the amended preliminary plat subject to the conditions that we've spelled out in the staff report and subject to the applicant entering into the development agreement. That's actually condition number 3 that we have listed there, with any additional changes required by the city attorney. So that is the one addition that I'd ask that you consider relative to condition number 3. I think that's what I think the important stuff is.
So I think you've been through that. I don't know if the current one is what you have or has some minor changes.
Yeah, this is what we had as of last week, so.
The changes would be just minor.
Yeah, that's worth noting. If there are changes, I think they'd be very minor.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'm not making it.
Motion to approve River Point amended preliminary plat and development agreement approval request with the following, that the applicant enter into a development agreement.
Well, let's have you approve the development agreement subject to any minor changes.
Subject to any minor changes.
So you should all have a copy of it. And that should
Right.
be, that's not final, that's very, very close.
Okay, good enough.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Argal, a second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Golf course rates. Come on down. You've been waiting all this time.
In the interest of time, I'm going to cut my presentation down to about an hour.
That's good. I hope your resume is updated.
Yeah, I don't have that much to say on the rates. Hopefully you guys have been able to look it over a little bit. Usually this time of year, we call around other courses, kind of see what their rates have been and what they propose to be for next year, and then we kind of try to formulate our rate structure according to what those in the valley are doing. The yellow one in the middle there is Gladstan's rates for next year. They went to City Council 2 weeks ago and already got approved, and we are kind of following suit on that. So we're proposing to go up $1 per 9 holes on our regular rates, and then our season passes we're proposing to go up a little bit as well. This will match what Gladstone and Payson have approved, and we're a little bit lower than Hobble Creek, about $1 per 9 holes, and our season passes are a little bit lower than Hobble Creek as well. So basically we're just proposing to kind of stay in line with what everybody else is doing, with the exception of Hobble Creek. We're a little bit less than. So I would just submit the rates as written, and if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Are you going to keep the special that can you?
Yeah, that's so we raised the special from $10 to $12 and $20 to $24 this year, and it's we need to do a little more research on it, but it's been about what we thought it was going to be. It's decreased play a little bit, but we've still probably made about as much money, and so that's kind of what we were hoping it would do. So it's been good.
What's it going to take to get the mayor's swing back after he's out of his sling?
Sorry about that. I didn't know.
Well, you were part of when the doctor told me about this. I asked him if it improved my golf game, and he said it would. And I said, good, because I'm a lousy golfer. But he did mention that the Golf Pro does need to work with me, the part of my rehab. So you're okay with that?
I want to.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
He's a patient man.
You'll need a lot of patience. Great. Any other questions?
On any of it?
No, things are going great up there.
Cares up there quite a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Looks beautiful.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're up
All
there
right.
quite a bit, huh?
I'd entertain a motion.
I'm a teacher. I have summers off.
Why don't you make the motion?
I move that we approve the golf course rates.
Second. Got a motion by Councilman Scobes, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Go get them.
While I'm up here, can I just tell you guys how much I appreciate your support of the golf course, and I want to tell the residents how much I appreciate their support of the golf course. The new addition is great, and the landscaping we've got up there now, the water feature and everything it's really nice, and just want to tell everybody how much as a staff we try to make it a nice place for the community to come and enjoy their round of golf, and we appreciate everybody's support.
We appreciate what you do, Ryan. Thank you. All Abilities Park CMGSC agreement.
Get his money worth. He sat there for almost 2 hours.
Gee, what did we get?
What do you get? The new park.
Yay.
How's that?
Do it.
So I don't know, I realize some of this information came to you guys late. I don't know how much you reviewed. So we sent out a proposal for a construction manager, general contractor for the All Abilities Park. We had 4 proposals returned to us. We interviewed 3 of those in this last week and have a contract here for Westland Construction. That name might be familiar to you, since we just hired them to build the fire station. If you look at, you can look at the scoring system there. They actually, of the fees, they're the least expensive. So the interview and hiring interview committee was unanimous in this choice. We had some good contractors that presented proposals to us, but strongly felt that Westland Construction were the ones we needed for this particular job. So I believe you had, I don't know if you got, I hope you had updated information. Did they get the most recent? Okay. So you can see Westland's total fees there are $647,000, which includes, again, the construction management, and also the general contractor. So, any questions on that?
Hey, no questions. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the All Abilities Park CNGC agreement.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Beck, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, moderate income housing report.
You want us to move up one? You want, oh, okay.
We need to turn a report into the state. The findings of that report we provided to you guys. I don't know if you've looked them over. I'll touch on a couple of highlights. This exercise that we're going through right now, it is required by state law. Frankly, I think, looking very holistically, that it's a great thing. And I say that because I know that there are communities over the years that have really gone out of their way to avoid developing any kind of diverse housing inventory in their particular communities. And I think above all, as I understand kind of the motivation behind this, it's to give meaningful reason for communities to seriously look at ways that they can do just that. Provide ultimately for more diverse, different types of housing in their cities. The process that we've gone through to prepare this report isn't entirely new. You might remember that this time a year ago, we presented something to you for you to review. However, with this past legislative session, there were some changes made to the things that we report on and the frequency that this report is provided to the state. It's kind of interesting that still materials that were given by the folks that we report to, this is noted as a biennial, as if it's done every other year. It's not, it's done annually. So I think this is something that we'll likely talk about, probably just briefly in most years, but we'll probably be talking about it on an annual basis for many years to come. There are a number of different strategies that are now afforded to communities to consider as ways to help address whatever you want to call it. I think you can call it a lot of different things. A shortage in affordable or moderate income or low income housing that a community might have, or a shortage just for housing opportunities broadly that a community might have. I think there's some 23 different provisions that are spelled out in the state law now. Communities are required to employ at least 3 of those provisions, and to include those provisions as part of this report. I'm just going to touch now on what those are from our perspective, and I mention this by way of this is a report that staff has prepared. It's accurate and it's legitimate, and I think it does satisfy the obligation that we have to comply with state law, but there, of course, are more ways to skin the cat than what I'm going to report on tonight. And if you have strong feelings about different strategies that we should consider in the future, I'd love to chat about that. Strategy number one, and this is verbatim from the state law, rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing. You'll recall that on a couple of different occasions this past year, zoning's been changed to residential 3, one of our zoning districts that allows for higher than what historically has been normal density in Spanish Fork. We've approved developments in that particular zone on a few different occasions. We can demonstrate clearly that we've employed that strategy to add a particular type of housing ultimately to Spanish Fork. A second strategy that we've employed, a little bit of a big deal, where the regulations that we have relative to ADUs were changed previously this year. Appreciated the work that all of you and the Planning Commission spent on that. That I think is probably long-term going to be one of the more significant things that has happened in Spanish Fork to address the broader issues that this is about. The third strategy, encourage higher density or moderate income residential development near major transit investment corridors or general plan, clearly illustrates that that is ultimately the goal. And we continue to field proposals for, again, higher than normal densities in accordance with the general plan. Those typically come to you with recommendations for approval, and I think they typically end up getting approved. So that's what I submit tonight. This is a brief overview of the report and the findings of the report. We are required to present those findings to you, and I think the Planning Commission as well. We had a similar conversation with the Planning Commission a few weeks ago. The report's due on December 1st. I think they're going to have it on November 20th. And I do want to take a couple of more minutes for some commentary. This is a really important issue, without a doubt. The housing situation on the Wasatch Front is what it is. In some respects, it's been great, right? Those of us that have some equity, we've seen that grow. We like that, we appreciate it. But in different ways, there are constraints that come on our lives in different ways, and constraints that come with economic development and growth that aren't always good. Spanish Fork City has always done its part to provide for diverse types of housing. I've appreciated some of the things that you've done in recent years to recognize that there are opportunities to do a better job. In particular, a couple of years ago, it's going to sound a little bit strange, but the adoption of the estate density zone, that was to accommodate a diverse type of housing stock that we weren't seeing in the community before. Larger lots, less density, not necessarily in any way increasing the supply of low-income housing, but certainly a different type of housing. Maybe more germane to this discussion, the adoption of the R4 and R5 zones. Project like the Reese Apartments, having that approved with new zoning provisions, addressing a need that our housing inventory had on the other end of the spectrum, with higher densities going from potentially just 12 units to the acre up to 18. That's a really big deal. And again, I've appreciated what you guys have done. And frankly, I think you would have done that regardless of whether the state law required that kind of action to be taken or not. I think there's been an understanding that having, again, housing options and a certain amount of diversity in Spanish Fork, those are concepts and principles that in different ways have been valued over the years. Just a couple of other things that I want to touch on relative to comments that we occasionally hear in our office. I don't know necessarily what you folks here. Before I do that, I want to give Brandon Snyder from my office credit for putting this report together. I think he did a great job. So I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but we've grown a little bit differently in recent years than we had maybe for some time before 2014 or 15. But honestly, not a lot differently. We have a chart here, and this is a little bit goofy. There are really two things relative to growth that are worth paying some attention to. First of all, when you act on a preliminary plat, you're taking action that specifically impacts how the community is going to grow for the next 2 or 4 or 6 or 10 years. That's typically, kind of the lifespan of a residential development, anywhere, in that range. And we can use the number of home sites that have been approved in preliminary plats to some extent to predict how we're going to grow in the future for the next several years. We want to know how we're growing right now. We look at building permits. So one of the metrics helps us kind of predict how we're going to grow. The other is simply a measurement of what is happening right now. These colors get blurred just a little bit here. I apologize for that. And even maybe without getting really in the weeds here, you'll see, for example, single family preliminary plat approvals. We were pretty high back in 2016. Took a really big dip in 2017. Had a pretty good year last year. Had a really sharp dip again this year. So aside from what's happened here and what inventory that created for future growth, maybe 2020, 21, 23, and so forth, we've seen a pretty sharp drop now. And frankly, we don't have very many projects in the queue that we're reviewing that have any significant number of single-family homes with them. Kind of suggest that, again, for years out here, that type of growth might be throttled back a little bit. Multifamily preliminary plat approvals. It's been fairly constant. We've seen a really sharp peak in that this year, though, moving up. You'll think about maybe some projects such as the Anella Townhomes over near Expressway Lane, the vicinity of Wendy's, that type of an area, over 100 townhomes there. There is the Legacy Farms townhomes, 150 homes. We've seen a couple of smaller projects. We actually do have several townhome projects that we're reviewing right now, which are sizable. Incidentally, if we do go back in time beyond 2014, you will see a very consistent trend relative to housing prices go up. And what happens? Do homes get bigger when housing prices go up? No. Homes get smaller. Multifamily housing becomes more and more attractive because more and more people can qualify for that. There's a much broader market for that particular product. That's what we're seeing right now. Certainly on the development approval side, that's what we're seeing. I think this is kind of curious, though. We actually have seen, relative to building permits this year, we've seen a drop, both in single-family homes, but also an even steeper drop in multifamily building permits that we've issued. So some of the things that I've heard residents express relative to why is the city approving all of these townhome projects and that type of a thing, I often don't assume that I'm hearing that comment because they're tracking things that are on your agenda. It's more of what they might be driving by in the community and seeing under construction. But really, our experience in recent years doesn't necessarily suggest that that's true at all. There's a significantly smaller percentage of the building permits that we will issue this year in 2019 that'll be any kind of multifamily product than what we've had for quite some time in the past. That being said, I think that's going to change just with what has already been approved, and certainly what's in the pipeline, assuming that there's a reasonably good chance that those projects get approved. And we are working on an apartment project. It'll be the first utilization of the R4 zone. You might see that in January. That certainly could change how our growth looks for several years to come. I kind of thought, because of how things were trending before this year, that 2019 might be the year that we actually see more permits issued for multifamily structures than single-family structures. That is happening in communities all along the Wasatch Front. Communities that there's no way that 10 years ago, even I would say certainly 20 years ago, I think anybody would have predicted that that would ever happen for lots of different reasons. So I thought we would be getting there. It kind of surprises me that we're not quite there yet, but that's kind of the nature of growth and where we're at. For me, some of the stuff is relevant to the discussion about a modern income housing report. as really evidence that we are doing our part to accommodate what the market will support. And I think ultimately that's the bottom line. We don't build housing. Sometimes I get really, really frustrated when I hear maybe it's somebody that's really influential in the state that has close ties to the home building industry talk about what cities aren't doing to help address the need, or what cities are doing to be counterproductive relative to accommodating that need for additional housing and types of housing. We can prove, I think, that we don't act that way and that we haven't acted that way historically. So the discussion that we have relative to something like this report, I think is, it's more than superficial, but I think it's also kind of a formality, given the real work that's happening to make sure that, again, we're good actors in the realm of accommodating what the market will support and what a community needs. So you didn't need any kind of a soapbox, but you sort of got it. I apologize for that. And we'll get the report submitted tomorrow, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? No?
Yes.
You've used all yours. Anybody else?
Just one quick comment question. I noticed in the report that the accessory dwellings, 13 or 18 permits, so at least of the total number that the city thinks exists, it was like 7% is all that had come in. I don't know if this report would be the right spot. I'm just thinking that looking at trends, those 13 permits, or at least applications, permits, in my mind, is new housing, because they've gone through the steps, upgrades, whatever, to meet that. Would it be appropriate to have it in this report or in this chart to see that in 2016 there were 13 permits issued, 18, 24, to see if there's a trend if people are using the ADUs more or less frequently over time? Or is that something we should keep aside?
I apologize for giving you way more of an answer to that than you probably want. One of the issues, one of the concerns
That's
with
why I didn't want you to.
We can talk offline if
one of the concerns
we
with
need.
the state
I'm okay with that.
requirements is, so what do we do next year? We have a list of 23 things that we can choose from. We have to pick 3 different things next year, and 3 different things the year after that, and so forth. If that's the case, we're really going to struggle, and you would have to do some things that I don't really think that broadly your constituents want you to do. But instead, most communities are simply planning on reporting on the very thing that you asked about. So we would say in 2018, there were X number of accessory dwelling units in Spanish Fork. In 2019, that number's grown by Y.
Sure.
And in that respect, we're showing either progress or regression.
Right.
So yes.
Add that to the inventory.
Yes. Well, that'll probably be the essence of next year's report unless some requirement changes. Okay.
Thank you.
Good, Dave.
So do we need to make a motion to approve this?
It's not an action.
Okay, this is information. Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. And Kier.
I'm Brandon Snyder.
Canvass of the 2019 election. This will go quick.
Congratulations.
All right. Okay.
All right, so it's kind of, I got 82 slides. I've trimmed it down to 11. This is the 2019 elections. It was done 2 weeks ago. The county administered this election, and tonight is the canvas of the results that the county has sent to me this afternoon. This is the ballot. There was 4 candidates for 3 positions, 3 incumbents and 1 new person running. We did get vote by mail. We got our own drop box this year in the parking lot, and it was used probably the greatest of all the ones in the county.
Does that stay?
The people who picked it up.
That'll stay forever,
I hope so.
assuming we.
Won't be in Costco's parking lot. We got it here. We also still use the senior center for our voting place. If you remember a couple years ago, the long line, there's only about 100, just over 100 people all day is all that went there this time. That tells us that the voters that did vote know how to vote. We just need to get more to vote. This center is only used on the election day, and it closes at 8 o'clock. The question for the turnout for this time, this is the historical of which ones. Anybody want to guess?
What
30.
turnout was?
30.61%.
Yep, 30.6. 31%, which is outstanding considering it was not mixed with a county election, a state election, or a bond election, or any of the others, those types of things. You can see in some of the other years, if you go back to 2011, or let's see, when that was just a general election as far as for council, 13%. So we dramatically increased the turnout from then. This is the total registered voters we have, 18,000 in our city, and 5,500 voted, so 31%. This is a little statistical thing as far as what the county gives us. They managed the elections. They processed all the registrations. They processed all the ballots that were mailed out. All the ballots that were returned went through the county. We get this couple-page report. This fulfills their responsibility of how they accounted for all the ballots that was sent out. Something interesting, you see that there was 116 that did not count, and it gives the reason of why they weren't signed. It was past the postmark date, those types of things. So these are the ones that they, by law, if the voter put their phone number or their email address, the county has to try to contact them. And so if the ballot got there and they couldn't match the signature, or it was missing, or there was a problem, the county has to call or try to contact them the best they can to say, I got a problem with this. And they put that effort, but they just, I don't know how often, how long they do that effort, but they have to try to rectify that. But there was 116 that was that way. It was interesting to see after the election how many ballots were processed, counted after the election day. So only 139 actually came in after the last day. Okay, so the results, Mayor, to announce to you and through the canvas is that the top 3 vote getters will be sworn in as being on City Council, which is top vote getter was Stacy Beck, second was Brandon Gordon, and third was Chad Argyle. So those 3 will be the candidate, or will be the elected officials that will continue on for another 4 years. Okay. I have with you is your summary, if you kind of want to look at that, but this kind of gives you an idea of how it spreads across. I had to put this together from I gave you the stack of papers that they gave to me, and so I've gone through each one of those, put it all on one page for you. And I highlighted something that's always interesting to watch is who's the top vote getter in each one of those areas and how those are divided out. You can also see the percentage of each one of those, the turnout, and those different precincts. So this year we have 17 precincts, and if you want to look at how many number of registered voters, you see this line right here. That tells you how big those precincts are getting as they fill in. This is just for next year. So they want to keep them around 1,000. Once they get more than 1,000, then they start wanting to divide them again, and so we might get precinct 18 for next time, or 19. So it depends on how they go. So you can see this one's got 1,800, 1,700, 1,300. As those different areas up on the bench and different 8 is down by Leland, out towards Leland into the freeway. So we're probably going to get some new districts divided up out into those areas as the city grows out there. So this report is what I'll be sending to the Lieutenant Governor's office tomorrow, filing our results of our canvass to them, and that's all I have as far as the results and canvass for Spanish Fork City that Beck, Gordon, and Argal will be sworn in on January 7th of the first council meeting of the new year.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Kent. Missed the days where we used to have to sign them all. All right, is there a closed session? Oh, we got, excuse me. I need entertain a motion to accept the canvass of the 2019 election.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Seth?
Yeah.
I move we go into closed session for reasonably imminent litigation and land transaction.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.